All right, good morning. This is Greslin, and by request from my Patreon supporters, I'm doing a video today about FO4 Edit and basically how the Fallout 4 and really any of the other Bethesda games are put together. Um, and hopefully by the time we get through this video, you'll have a better understanding of why the different pieces work together the way they do and how the terminology works and basically how to put together your mod loadout so that you get the most seamless gameplay you can possibly get. First of all, I'm going to assume that you know what FO4Edit is, really what Xedit is. I'm going to assume that you know how to load it, how to do the most basic functionality. If you don't know if you don't know any of that, there's a ton of videos made by other people, more polished and better put together than this is going to be. So go off, do some Googling, look on YouTube, get yourself acquainted with the basics. I want to talk about other stuff today. This is FO4Edit version 4. Now, first thing when you load up, you're going to get this screen. This is the module selection screen. And this is basically your load order. And let me start by talking about load orders, ESMs, ESPs, and ESLs. You have to think about all your mods as basically a stack of database revisions because that's all that this is. This is a big database. It's in this database, which is initially contained in Fallout 4 ESM, defines every object, every behavior, everything about the game world that's not hardwired into the engine itself. Those objects are being defined in this massive database. So most of the time, if you're wanting to make a change to the game, you want to mod something in the game. What you're trying to do is you're trying to find which little bit of data in all this database, what little bit of data defines the thing you want to change. So when you first load Xedit, this is the screen you're going to get. This is the module selection screen, and it's showing your load order. And let me start by explaining what load order is. This game is built around a massive database. And most of that database is stored right here in Fallout4.esm. And you're going to see these are all plugins of various kinds. The ESMs are considered masters. The ESPs are plugins. You'll also see ESLs. I'm not going to get into ESLs in this video, but ESLs are light plugins that are basically ESPs, but designed differently and for a very specific job. Again, I'm not going to get into ESLs in this video. The main thing I want to talk about here is that an ESM is basically the core database record. And this works very much like database revisioning. You got a core database record here, and then everything below that on your load order is modifying things above it. The ESPs coming in as plugins are revision orders to records in the ESM. Now, the ESP can have brand new records. That you can create completely new records in an ESP. But for the most part, the ESP is designed to modify something defined in the core database in the ESMs. These all get loaded in a stack. So when the game boots up, and this is what FO4Edit is going to simulate. When the game boots up, the first thing it does is it's going to read the Fallout4.esm. That's the base game database. It's going to load that into memory. And then it's going to go down the list one by one. And in each step, it's going to read all those records. Some of the records are going to be brand new, in which case you'll simply add it to the database in memory. Or a lot of those records are also going to redefine or overwrite the records that are already in memory. And then we're going to go through each one of those, and that's going to overwrite. It's going to override whatever the database record is that's currently in memory. So by the time you get to the bottom of this load order, and it's only loading the ones here that are checked. By the time you get to the bottom of this load order, you have got a big database sitting in memory that's undergone all these changes in order. That's the reason why load order is important. Because the farther down you've got a plugin in the load order, the more likely that's going to be the final canon reference. That's going to be what the database looks at. So we're going to start here. Again, I've only got a handful of things that I've been using for my own test play purposes lately because I'm working on right now a new mod for companions, and so you're basically looking at my test bed here. And so we're going to load this up, and what is this going to do when I click OK? Is this going to load up the entire database in order and simulate how the game is going to interpret all this data. So let's click OK. And now, after a little bit of hang, here we go. See, this is telling you what it's doing. It's on all those database records. And now we're getting into the DLCs, Nuka, and now it's loading all the ones after it, all the ESPs and plugins. And it's going back and cross-referencing all the records so that now we get an idea of what the database is going to look like. This now should represent the database as it is in memory when the game loads. So now the beauty about FO4Edit is that let's do something here. Not the FNAL. Let's just take a look at armor keywords. Okay. Now, when you expand the definitions under any one of these plugins, you can see the contents of each plugin here. These are all the things that it adds or changes to the database. Now, before we go any further, I want to talk about forms and references and things like that, because that's really important to understand. For the most part, everything that you're seeing defined here, every one of these database records is what is known as a form. These are all everything in this database defines either an object or a behavior of an object somewhere in the game. The game itself, the engine, is just processing objects and events. An object is nothing more than a static chunk of data. An event is some sort of interaction in the system that affects that chunk of data. So if you got an NPC with armor and weapons and all that fun stuff, okay, that's an object made up of other objects. That NPC is now going to also be affected by various events. For example, on hit. The on hit events means that if that object takes an impact from a weapon of any kind, or an explosion or something, that on hit event is going to fire. And then you got back-end code that says, hey, if this on hit event takes place, go off and do this other code that's going to affect other behaviors, and on and on and on. So every one of these records in this entire database is what's known as a form. And when you see a form ID, that means that's basically the database record ID. All right. And up here, the form ID, that's just a hex code, index code for the form. In the editor ID is the human readable name for it. The form IDs, the first two digits, are always the first two load order hex of the plugin itself. The last 6 digits are the actual form ID itself. The two in front are going to change dynamically depending on where the plugin ends up in the load order. If you rearrange the load order, the really important part is the last 6 digits. So that's, I just want to get that out there up front. Now that we got a basic idea what form IDs are, it's important to understand the difference between a form and a reference. Now, for the most part, a form and a reference is a form. The form is the underlying is the underlying objects, the underlying database record. For the most part, though, forms are sort of blueprints, especially for objects. They tell the engine when it comes time to actually instantiate an object, refer to the form as the blueprint on how to do it. So if I went down, let's say, let's go down to where's our non-player characters? Non-player character actors. Here we go. And let's just randomly say Becky Fallon. I think she's over in DC. And over here, you're going to have an entire record here. This is the entire definition for Becky Fallon. This is Becky Fallon's form. And in it, you can see some basic graphical data. You can see that she's female. You can see a variety of statistics. You can see who she likes and who she doesn't like. You can see that she's human. You can see her basic RPG properties, which really obviously don't factor much into this game. What her base health is, her action points, her default inventory, some basic AI settings. So this is the entire blueprint for Becky Fallon. Now, when the game actually creates Becky Fallon in the game, what it's doing is it's referring to this blueprint and saying, I'm now going to create an object named Becky Fallon that conforms to this blueprint. That object that's now in the game is a reference. The reference is not the same thing as the form. The form is the blueprint that is used to make the reference, and the reference is in there dynamically. The reference is actually in the engine. The form itself, again, is just the list of instructions on for the engine how to make the blueprint, for how to make the reference. That's also really important to understand, because sometimes, especially when you're dealing with NPCs, if you start looking into, and I don't want to get too deep into the weeds on this, but if I looked into the world space, which is the type of record that actually defines the world, defines the buildings and all the things that are placed. Occasionally, if you take, I think we're not looking for, these are persistent, we want temporary. There's no temporary here. Let's see. Here we go. See, and this is over in Bunker Hill. This is the part of the record. This is part of the worldview definition, the world space definition that defines the Bunker Hill area. You can see this is where nav meshes are stored. These are, and right here are some of the NPCs that get created in Bunker Hill. So we have Kessler, for example. Now, Kessler, these are references. And they're usually within the game. You can see they're usually written with an REF in the form ID. Not always, but they usually are. The base actor, that points to the blueprint. That's going to be in the NPC record itself. But these are actually dropped into the world space. And so this record, even though it's technically also a form, is a special kind of form that defines a reference. And it tells the game to create an instance of Kessler in Bunker Hill. And the rest of this record is just sort of, where do I want to put him? What things are we linking him to make sure he works right with quests and things like that. So I could go on for the next 3 hours about the difference between form and references. I just want you to have the basic understanding so that you don't spend too much time pulling your hair out, altering base form records when what you should be doing is altering a reference, or vice versa. Because if you don't understand that, the rest of this becomes very, very frustrating. So, I was also asked to specifically talk about things like armor keywords and some of these sort of meta mods, and to kind of explain what they do. So, I'm just going to talk about armor keywords, and I think this may be an outdated version of it. I don't know. But if we take a look here, when you anytime you actually click one of the form records, what you're going to get over here in the right-hand pane is sort of the history of how it's being altered. Remember I said each of these plugins is altering something, a higher up than it, or it's creating a new record. This is an example of what it's doing. So you click on the one in question, and now you're going to get the entire record, but you're also going to get every revision and every change that's happening to that record. This is the original Fallout.esm version. Then ArmorKeywords.esm is coming along behind it and making its own changes. In this case, what Armor Keywords is doing is actually not anything keyword related. It's pulling some material swaps out of this particular record. And so when the game actually loads up, this is going to be the version of that record that the engine sees. This is the version that Bethesda put out. This is the version that the engine sees. Now, what you may want to do is create a further revision that incorporates parts of both of these. In fact, you're going to be doing that a lot because different mods have different visions of how the game is going to work, and you're going to have your own vision, and so you're going to have to figure out how to have the best of both worlds and make your own inline plugin. That's called mod reconciliation. So let's take a quick look at how that works. This does not seem to be helpful. Hold on a second here. Sorry. Just take a look at weapons. Baton. There we go. What's this? Here we go. ArmorKeywords.esm is a mod that mostly what it does is it adds new keywords to weapon and armor records that other mods can then use. In this case, it's adding things like material swaps, and it's just adding functionality to like the weapon and armor records. Now these meta mods, the reason why these meta mods were designed to start with was not really so much so that they would enhance your immediate gameplay. They're designed for other mods to draw on, so that let's say you have 5 other mods that alter armor. Now, if those mods all kind of implemented these same basic changes, added their own keywords and added their own, whatever to them, now you've got 5 mods that you've got to somehow reconcile. You've got to decide which keywords are going to be the ones that you're going to end up using. You've got to go back and do research and try to figure out what is going to affect what. You got a lot of fragmentation in your mod order. The point of mods like armor keywords and some of these other meta mods is to try to create sort of an agreed upon base for other mods to use, so that you don't have to deal with that problem quite as much. That's why you'll have some mods that are going to say, yeah, my mod needs armor keywords as a master, because I'm relying on having these keywords in place, because I don't want to have to come up with my own regime that you're now going to have to reconcile. They got a lot of meta mods to do that, and believe me, the Fallout modding world will be a much, much messier place without them. So, but sooner or later, you are going to have to do reconciliation. So let's talk about reconciliation for a minute. Let's say, for example, this is the record, it's the form record for the 10mm pistol. These are things you're going to see, you're going to get used to seeing them all the time. These are some of the basic weapons here. The minigun, pipe gun, a machete, the basic assault rifle. We're going to deal with the 10mm pistol for right now. Now, let's say, for example, I'm not happy with what the changes armor keywords makes. Now, I'm perfectly happy with the changes armor keywords makes, but just for the sake of argument, for the sake of demonstration, let's assume that. The best way I've found to usually handle that situation is you go up to the master record, the original one from Fallout 4, right-click right there, and say copy as overwrite into. And we're going to click that, and yes, I'm sure. And I want to create a new file.esp. And then we're going to give it this is save. Let's just call it final patch. And now we've got a new ESP. We created a new plugin. If I go scroll down here, you're going to see it at the bottom, and it contains one record, and that is the 10mm pistol, because that's the only thing that we've changed. Now, if I go to file header, you can see here none of the record flags are set. If that or that were checked, it could be considered a different file type, and I'm not going to get into that. It's an ESP, so none of those files are set. The only master is Fallout4.esm. The masters basically mean if any of those ESPs have something here listed as a master, the ESP will not load if that master is not present in your load order. You'll get an error, and the save simply won't load. It will give you a message and ask, do you want to continue loading with everything relevant turned off? But it won't load the plugin. Luckily, the only master this particular plugin has is Fallout4.esm, so we're good to go, because that will always be there. Now, again, everything in Fallout 4 ESM and everything in Armor Keywords ESM is now officially being ignored in this load order, because finalpatch.esp is the final word. But you can see the records are red here, meaning they're being overridden downstream. All we're really basically doing, because all we did was did a copy as overwrite into a new file. We're just told it to make the Fallout 4 version, the base version, the final version. But let's say we wanted to include some of this stuff from Armor Keywords. We would click the thing we want to keep and drag it. See, now since this is a brand new bit of data that doesn't exist in the Fallout 4 ESM, now we have to list Armor Keywords as a master to the final patch ESP. And it's asking you, do you really want to do that? Because, again, you're creating upstream dependencies, and if you don't have the ESM in the load order, the ESP won't run because it needs it as a master. But in this case, yeah, we're going to roll with that. And that is now in the final patch. We can also drag, since Armor Keywords is already a master, we don't have to tell it to do that again. And we just kind of click and drag over the things we want to keep, and we don't click and drag the things we don't. If we had more mods on the 10mm pistol, for example, let's say we had something else here that changed the name of the 10mm pistol, like to the N99, which I believe is the lore name for the 10mm. Then we would also have to drag that over. Final patch at this point is just a collection of mix and match. You're just taking it's just a buffet. You're just deciding which of each mod you want to keep in that final version. I hope some of that made sense. So let's see. Some other things I want to talk about. Um, let's see. One of the big catches you're going to run into is anything that's like a tag mod, because what tag mods do is they add text elements into not the editor ID. Sorry, you're not going to want to change the editor ID. Changing it to like an N99 would be changing the display name. They would put a tag, usually something in brackets, into the display name, which is then recognized and interpreted by the interface. But again, if I said, like, let's say this did something like that. Let's do that. You're going to see something like this in a tag mod, where gun represents an icon that's going up on the screen. And if we didn't turn around and followed it up with an ESP that edited out or overrode that name, say going back to the canon, the Fallout 4 version of it, the tag would not appear because the tag is being overridden. Now, that can also work the other way. If the last mod you've got on your list is a tag mod, and now you've got the last one on here is the name, but the only thing it changes in the entire record is the name. All the changes that are being made by any mod you have higher up is now gone. Because if you don't do what I'm saying right here, creating your own end patch, mixing and matching what you need, then you're going to lose all those changes because the last thing you did was a tag. So that is mostly, again, that's mostly that right there. I'd say it's about 80% of what you're ever going to do in Xedit is taking a look at how all the different database plugins interact with each other, creating your own in-stream plugin, and just dragging over what you want and where you want it, and deciding what mix of various things you want in the final revision of the database. All right. I want to talk about one other thing, because sometimes what you really want is you want Xedit to just go through the entire database, find any conflicts, and try to come up with its own reconciliations, and then you want to come along behind it and clean them up and tell it what it got wrong and make your own corrections. You don't want to do each and every one of these things by hand. The way you do that is you go down here, Other, and say Create Merge Patch. Ignore this box. It's been unsupported for Fallout 4 since the day Fallout 4 came out, but we do it all the time. So, you want to continue? Yes, I do. And give it a name. And what you just told Xedit to do was to go through this entire database, find the things that are real reconciliation problems, and just give it its best shot. Usually it's over things like item lists and things like that. But in this case, it's not a problem. It couldn't find anything. But if you had a variety of mods that changed, for example, level item, these are lists that handle things like random loot and armor and like level scaling on armor and things like that. If, for example, let's copy this over. Let's copy some vendor junk to our little final patch. Okay. And all I want to do is I want to get rid of the cake pan. Let's get rid of that. And there's too many damn fire extinguishers in this game. Let's get rid of that. and get rid of that and a broom. Okay. We're going to scroll down. I want to get rid of this, which apparently is not what. Okay, let's just create a new patch. I thought I could delete that, but apparently I can't. So I'm going to go here, create merge patch. Another merge. And that worked really great. Okay. Oh. Is that what I did? Is that what I did? No, I didn't think it was a reconciliation problem. Okay, well, let's give it a reconciliation problem. One moment. Let's create a new level entry. And make it a level 0 item. And we're just adding a dog head. Other merge patch, yes. And it still is perfectly fine with the changes I made. Okay. If there were serious show-stopping merge problems, it'd be showing up here. Evidently, I'm not making them serious enough. My advice usually is especially if you got a big order and you're trying to reconcile a lot, always do that. Always create a merge patch. Just if for no other reason, just to see what FO4Edit thinks you should be changing. It can usually highlight things that you weren't noticing, things that could be CTD problems. Just always do that. If I close this out completely, it's going to ask me which of these files I want to save. These have not actually been saved yet. I think I would only keep the final patch. So you can just do these on a temporary basis and see what records it thinks you should change and what you should merge. It's just a labor-saving device. And it can also really save your life in terms of CTD tracking. Because if you've got records here that are serious referential problems that are going to just shut the engine down, that's also often going to come up here. It's going to show up in this automatic merge, and so you get a chance to fix it before it becomes a problem. Let's see. Speaking of errors, I'm going to ask one last thing. I'm going to talk about one last thing here, and then I'm going to say right now, I've got a personal policy. I really try not to say bad things about other modders and their work, because modding's hard, man. Modding is just hard. Especially since so much of this stuff is undocumented. So much of this stuff is trial and error experiment. So much of this stuff is pulling your hair out and trying to work your way around bugs that Bethesda abandoned. Design choices that they made to make consoles more viable. All these things you got to work around and hack around and try not to screw up even worse. It's a tough hobby, man. And so I try not to criticize other modders because it's a hard game. That being said, a lot of mods get released with either extraneous records in the mod that do not actually contribute to the mod themselves. They're just junk records. I've got them. Most mods that have not been seriously cleaned by the authors have got something in there that once was a part of the mod, is now deprecated and just didn't get cleaned out. I've got 3 or 4 keywords in PA and PC that are used for nothing because once upon a time they were used. Now they're not used. They're still sitting out in the plugin. I just haven't cleaned it up. So it's never a bad idea to look through a new mod that you're installing and just try to see if there's something there that just seems to be changing something that just not contributing to the game, not contributing to the mod, and either eliminate it in the PSP, or even better yet, what you really should be doing is eliminating it in a patch, just to clean up your personal game. But the other problem that you're going to run into often is sometimes an ESP mod is released with straight up errors in the database. Referential loops, just things that should have been caught but weren't caught. And when those errors get hit by when the engine hits the errors as it loads up the game, your odds of getting a CTD go straight through the roof. The way you handle that is, and I'm not picking on R91 for any reason. I'm just using this randomly. You highlight the mod, or if you want, you can highlight the mods. But let's just highlight this because I think there actually is an error in R91. You would right-click and go to check for errors. And yeah, R91, at least according to FO4Edit, R91 has a handful of errors. And primarily what is R91, what FO4Edit's finding is there are some data lines that it expects to be populated, but they're actually blank. Some of the material mods, it expects to find a keyword type record, and there's a miscellaneous reference instead. Now these may or may not be actual errors in terms of game breaking problems. I use R91 all the time. These particular errors have never broken my game. That being said, sometimes you're going to find errors that will break your game. So again, it's never a bad idea to run a check for errors. You can also go down here, just go down here, hit Control A to select all, and just scope out the errors. And this is going to take a little while. Basically, do an error scan for over the entire game. And as you can see, even the original Fallout 4 ESM, FO4Edit is going to find things and say, yeah, you're missing stuff. You guys screwed up something here. See, this is all coming from Fallout 4.esm. These are all errors according to FO4Edit. So, and these all came directly from Bethesda. But they're obviously not game-breaking problems, because if they were, it would break the game. But even here, you got world space. You got straight up these the forms that are in the world space that don't exist in the database. That's what the error could not be resolved means. The forms are not listed. There's a reference there of some kind, but FO4Edit can't find that actual record. But for whatever reason, it's not game breaking. So it's, again, not all of these errors, not all the errors that you're going to find this way are going to be game breaking problems, but enough of them might be to give you a clue that you should at least take a closer look at something and maybe deselect that record out of your final patch, or try to do some research to find out what that particular record does and try to fix it yourself. That just it's always worth your time to when you're doing a new mod to just do a check for errors and see if there's something got lost and left. Because I'll tell you right now, Creation Kit. I'm gonna tell you right now, the secret to happy modding is don't load up Creation Kit any more than you absolutely humanly have to. If you can do the job with FO4Edit and Notepad++, for the love of God, do it. Because CK, there's some things you have to use CK for. If you're going to edit the nav mesh, if you're going to like rearrange world space and things like that, move things around the world space, there's no way around it. There's no third-party tool that's better. You're going to have to use CK to do that. But for things that are like you want to just give an NPC a new hat, something like that, you don't need CK to do that. You can do it much faster and more reliably with FO4Edit once you know what the records are. And you also the problem with Creation Kit is that it has a bad habit of adding things to your plugin that you didn't intend to have in there. Anything that it thinks mildly have been changed will get saved into your plugin. So anytime you're making something in Creation Kit and you save your plugin, always go back into FO4Edit, take a look what's actually in the plugin, and see if it's adding in new records that look weird and things that you shouldn't be there. Because it does often. The Fallout 4 version of CK, not nearly as bad as it was back in the GEC days, but it still doesn't. So if you've got to load CK, okay, so be it. But especially if you're doing anything in the world space, after you finish saving your work in CK, go back. See all these errors? They're still coming off of Fallout 4 ESM. We're still in Fallout 4 ESM. These are all errors. These are all missing forms. These are things that are referenced in the world space that aren't actually there. This is why modders get crazy. So while we are still just searching forever into errors, which so far we have found 118 of them in the Fallout 4.esm. What else can we talk about here? Don't get too hung up over trying to figure out what each and every field in each and every record for each and every form does. Nobody really knows. I've been doing this about 10 years, and I am still figuring out even some of the most basic things. The best way you can figure out what things do is take a look at other mods, especially small ones. Find the mods that are really simple that only change a few things. Because for example, if you want to find a mod that changes the weight of a 10mm pistol, for instance, find a mod that just does that. A teeny tiny mod. Fall in love with the mods that are like 2K, in size, because those will tell you exactly what certain things do, and you will learn a lot by looking at just the tiniest mods. And then just get into the habit of looking at how the mods that you use are put together. You will learn everything about level lists and how NPCs are designed and templates and all that just by looking at how things were done before, including going back and looking at the base game. 90% of the time when I'm not sure how to solve a problem, I start digging into the base game to try to figure out, is there any place back there that the base game did it first? Usually there is. So that's my advice. I hope some of this was useful. This probably went on a little longer, and I know it wasn't nearly as organized as you may have liked or that I would have liked, but I hope something here was useful. Again, if you wanted more information on the basics of FO4 edits and getting around an Xedit, go back, go look around on YouTube. There are much more polished videos that just take you step by step from the most basics, from the most basic functions all the way up. I also have links in my Discord in the Xedit talk section to good documentation, the things that I started with, and I'm also happy to answer any questions. If you have any questions about Xedits and how to do things that I haven't covered here, please drop by my Discord. Find the Xedit talk channel, ask, and if I can't help you, somebody else will, but I can probably help you. So, hope you're having a good morning. Hope you're having fun modding, and I'll catch you on the flip side. Stay tuned for more updates on Pace. I'm still on my way to 2.0 of PA-MPC. I've got a new version of Stash Those Caps coming out, and yeah, so life is good, and we're staying busy, and hope you're having fun. So have a good morning and stay safe out there in the wasteland.